Okay, so we're going to be taking T-notes on how to form a hypothesis. And this is another step in the scientific method. So we've learned about variables, we have learned about research question and control in experimental groups. So after you have figured out what question you want to ask, you need to tell us what your hypothesis is about that experiment. So the first question is, what is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is just a guess. It is a guess on what you think will happen in an experiment. It is the prediction. Now, just like we had a specific format on how to write a research question, there is a specific format I want you to follow for your lab reports. And so the format is if the independent variable, and you have to choose one of these. So if the independent variable increases or if the independent variable decreases, then the dV will increase or the dV will decrease because of these great and educated reasons. Okay, so just go ahead and write this down, and then I'm going to give you a few examples to get you started. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a hypothesis given the amount of hair versus the swim speed. So here is the hypothesis. The first step is just to fill out this first line. So if the, and we know the independent variable is the amount of hair a swimmer has on his or her body. So if the amount of hair a swimmer has on his or her body, we just need to choose one of these two. So let's go ahead and choose increases. So if the amount of hair a swimmer has on his or her body increases, then and you just have to fill in what the dependent variable is, and we know that the dependent variable is the swim speed. What do you think will happen? So if the amount of hair a swimmer has on his body increases, then the swim speed will, well, let's just say decrease, right? It will decrease because, and this is an example of a good reason. More hair causes more friction from the water, which slows you down. Make sure you copy this down. This is in our T-notes. So I just noticed that my line over here I put way over to the left, but I wanted to make sure that you were able to see my example. So write this in your right side of your T-notes. You could also choose something different to say. So for example, if again, the amount of hair a swimmer has on his body, let's go ahead and choose decreases. Okay, so write this one down also just so you have a second example of what I'm talking about when you can go either way. You can either have increases or you could have decreases. So if the amount of hair a swimmer has on his or her body decreases, then the dependent variable, the speed a person swims, will increase because more hair causes more friction from the water, which slows you down. Without the hair, there is less friction. The person will swim faster. So as you can see here, I used 3 sentences in my because. So your hypothesis does not have to be one sentence. It can be one sentence, but in order to make the hypothesis good, and what I mean by good is that your reasoning in your because part of your statement, sometimes you're going to need multiple sentences. The more, the better, as long as it's clear. Okay, so this is your second example on how to choose either increase or decrease for your hypothesis. Now, let's say I gave you a different example. How about this experiment? How does air temperature change when there are more clouds in the sky? Okay, so think about that. Does air temperature change when there are more or less clouds in the sky? What would be my independent variable? Go ahead and pause this video, write this down, think about the IV/dV, and then restart the video when you have a guess. Okay, so your independent variable here should be the number of clouds. Your dependent variable, what you're measuring, is the temperature. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is move to the next page, and what I'd like for you to do is just try making your hypothesis given the IV and the dV for this experiment. So here is what it would look like before you fill anything out. So go ahead and pause the video, fill in what you think would happen. So remember, all you need to know is your IV and your DV, and then you need to give me an educated guess why you think this certain prediction will happen. Okay, so go ahead and pause this and start it up when you're finished. All right, so by now you should already have a hypothesis. And let's go ahead and fill it out. And just remember, I might be choosing increase or decrease. So if it doesn't match, just make sure that it makes sense to you. So if the number of clouds increases, so let's say we increase the number of clouds, then I think that the temperature will decrease. And the reason why, clouds will block the sun. There is not as much heat when the sun is blocked. Therefore, the temperature will go down. You might have something different, depending on whether or not you chose decrease or up in the IV section. If you chose decrease, then your answer might be something different. So here is our simulation of the sky, and we're going to be taking the temperature of the air, and you're probably wondering what all these little red and yellow dots are. These are sunlight photons and infrared photons. So each of these carries some amount of heat that comes from the sun. So what we have right now is about 58 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's go ahead and just watch this and just see what kind of temperature we have before we start to add the clouds in. So it's in Fahrenheit right now. It's about 60, 61 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's go ahead and add the number of clouds. So we're going to be increasing the number of clouds, and we're going to wait to see what happens over time. So this might take a little while, and then we'll see if whether or not I can fast forward this part. But let's go ahead and add the clouds and take a look at what happens to the temperature. So we started around 58, 59, 60, and as you can see, it's already starting to go down. It fluctuates. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Okay, I think we can safely say that from watching this, it looks like, I'll go ahead and pause this, is that the temperature is lower and it's going lower over time in comparison to what it was when we first began. So, is our hypothesis correct? So, here's what we had for our hypothesis, the one that I created. You might have had something a little bit different depending on what you decided to choose. So, the temperature went down as my number of clouds increased. So my hypothesis is correct. However, you could word it a little bit differently and still have a correct hypothesis. And remember that if your hypothesis is not correct, it doesn't mean that you're wrong, like it's a bad grade or something. It just means that that's what you thought would happen, and we're learning through experimentation. Okay, so here's another example. Go ahead and pause this video. Write this down, identify the IV and the DV, and then write a hypothesis, okay? So I want to see how temperature changes when there is more CO2. Remember, CO2 is carbon dioxide in the sky. And if you know anything about carbon dioxide is one of those things that causes global warming. So if you have more CO2 in the sky, what do you think might happen? So go ahead and pause this, identify the IV, DV, and then write the hypothesis. All right, so we should know that our IV is the amount of CO2 and the temperature is the DV. So let's go ahead and write your hypothesis, and it might be different from mine, but feel free to change yours up if you wish to. So if the amount of CO2 increases, then the temperature, or the temperature of the Earth, or the Earth's temperature, will also increase because, and your reasoning might be a little different, but I'm just giving you an example. CO2 catches the heat from the sun. More CO2 means more heat is trapped, making the temperature warmer. So let's go ahead and see whether or not our hypothesis is correct. So here is our little simulation here, and I'm going to go ahead and reset this. And let's go out here. So in the Ice Age, let's go ahead and let this run for a little bit to see where the Fahrenheit levels out for the temperature. And notice that the CO2 levels are 180 parts per million. And it looks like it's still climbing, still adjusting, 23, 24. Okay, so it's about still climbing. All right, so while we're waiting, just know that what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to today up here in the atmosphere. So, and then we're going to see how the CO2 changes. All right, so we've got about 35 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to go ahead and select today, and notice that it has a different amount of CO2, which is a total of 388, which is a lot more than the Ice Age. Okay, so we have 35 degrees or so Fahrenheit. Let's go ahead and start this and see what happens to the temperature. All right, just from looking at it, do you notice that it is increasing? The temperature is increasing. So we know that our hypothesis, if you chose to say that if the amount of CO2 increases, then the temperature will increase. For these reasons, your hypothesis is correct. All right, so what we've learned is how to create a good formatted hypothesis using if, then, because, and then for each line you have to choose either increase or decrease. What I would like for you to do is to practice, and you are going to be working on the hypothesis worksheet, and you will be writing your answers in your notebook. Remember, if you do the assignment on the computer, you must print it out to get the stamp, but it is not my expectation. So be prepared in class. The next class that I see you, you should have your TNOTES for hypothesis and your worksheet completed.